Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear all students. Welcome to the next topic of the histotechniques. This topic is an introductory topic about the tissue processing, and in this topic we will discuss about the aims of tissue processing, the labeling of specimen for the tissue processing, the principle of the tissue processing, and we will also discuss the factors which affect the tissue processing. The aim of the tissue processing is to provide sufficient rigidity and hardness to the tissue so that this tissue can be cut into thin section for microscopic examination, and this section can be easily cut into smaller pieces, and then sections and smears are prepared from this and they are examined under microscope. So, the tissue processing is basically a procedure to make the tissue suitable for the sectioning, and it must have suitable hardness and consistency, because when this tissue is presented to the knife, so it can easily cut this tissue into thin section, and this process is done by infiltrating and surrounding the tissue with the paraffin wax or infiltrating or sliding or low viscosity nitrocellulose and various type of reasons, or by freezing. So, these are the three procedures by which the tissue is processed. Normally, the paraffin wax is used for this process. The tissue processing have different stages and long procedure. Routinely, it is performed round about in 24 hours in the routinely used machines. The tissue processing consists of a carriage system, and this system is required to transfer the tissue into different steps during the process of the tissue processing, and small size representative sections from the biopsy specimens, they are put into cassettes and then they are labeled. These are the plastic cassettes which are labeled, and small pieces of the tissue, their representative sections are put into these cassettes and they are processed. Then these cassettes are transported from one reagent to another reagent in a container which is made from metal, and these metal containers are perforated so that the tissue can cover whole, so that the formalin or the liquid can cover all of the tissue. That is why these are the metal container which is put in this jar, and these cassettes are put into these containers so that they move from one jar to another jar, and every jar have different type of chemical for the process of tissue processing. The labeling of the specimen for processing. All specimen must be properly labeled before the processing starts. So, for this purpose, a pen containing ordinary ink is not used, because that printed, graphite, pencil written or typewritten or India ink written labels, these are satisfactory, and ordinary ink pen is not used because they are washed out by reacting with different chemicals during tissue processing. So, tissues that are fixed in osmium tetroxide should be labeled on a jar as in osmium tetroxide, because these turns the pencil or the writing to black. So, therefore, the jars should be written and they should be labeled. The label should be clearly written and must contain all the information which is required for the processing. These are the different type of tissue processors, and manually tissue is moved from one container of reagent to another by hand, and agitation is done manually, automatically completed by a mechanical device. So, these are the certain type of tissue processor. These are the automatic tissue processor, and here we can see the jars are removed and transferred from these jars to the next one. These are also a different type of automated tissue processors, but the tissue processing can also be performed manually, and we will discuss this manual tissue processing in the next lecture. The principle of tissue processing. So, water within the tissue is first removed from the tissues, and another medium is impregnated in the tissue which provides adequate support to the tissue. So, this process is performed in different stages. This is the sketch of the tissue processing. First, dehydration to remove water molecules, then clearing, so to remove the dehydrating agent, and impregnation to infiltrate the tissue with the supporting medium. So, this is the principle of the processing. In dehydration, the water is removed from the tissue and water immiscible with wax. So, therefore, it is removed, and for that purpose dehydration is important. Clearing is the step in which the dehydrating agent is cleared, and this clearing facilitates the transition of dehydration and impregnation stage. The agent used for the clearing purpose is soluble in both the dehydrating as well as the impregnating medium. And the infiltration and impregnation, this is the step in which tissue is infiltrated with the supporting medium, and this supporting medium provide rigidity to the tissues to make the thin sections. The different factors that affects the tissue processing, that is the size of the tissue. The smaller the size, the better the processing. The agitation, this agitation facilitates the contact of tissue with the fresh solution. Therefore, the process of the tissue processing is made faster by agitation. Heat also increases the penetration power of the fluid, so it can also be used, and it also affects the process of tissue processing. Viscosity of the medium, it also affects the processing, and higher the viscosity, lower the penetration. And the negative pressure is the last factor which affects the tissue processing. This removes trapped air and in the tissues, and also remove the clearing agent by increasing the volatility of that agent. Thank you for watching. If you have any question, you can ask. Assalamu alaikum.